Hi, everybody. Brian Valerio, Vice President with Alliance Advisors and the Proxy Solicitation Group. And today I am joined by Michael Barbera, President and CEO of First Coast Results, Inc. Mike does a lot of work on the Inspector of Elections and the tabulation of voting for both special and annual meetings, regular and contested meetings. So I thought he would be a perfect guest for us to talk about these issues and maybe talk about some of the changes that we've seen in these practices since the outset of the pandemic. So Mike, let me start by thanking you so much for joining me today.
Oh, my pleasure to be here, Brian.
Well, great. So let's get into it. Let's start by talking generally about your work as an inspector and a tabulator.
Sure. Our firm tabulates proxies, ballots for routine meetings, contested shareholder meetings, and special shareholder meetings. We have probably 150 clients on an annual basis that use our services in different formats. But our main focus is providing the Inspector of Election services, and especially in contested elections.
And have you seen a significant change in both the inspector work and the tabulation work since the outset of the pandemic?
Yes, absolutely. There have been quite a large number of changes, even as simple as the routine shareholder meetings. First of all, most of them have gone to a virtual format, as I'm sure you're aware, which was new to all these companies, and especially large Fortune 500 companies who are used to having their shareholder meetings in person with a large contingent of both company personnel and shareholders present. So now they had to switch gears and go to a format that most of them have never done before. So there was a lot of hand-holding and walking them through that process in terms of both the Inspector of Election and just the virtual meeting process itself. Additionally, the tabulation provided some challenges because depending on who the tabulator was and whether we were just the inspector and auditing tabulator, the tabulators were concerned that they were going to have difficulty in getting the mail as the pandemic grew worse and travel was restricted.
Sure.
They were concerned that they weren't going to be able to get to the post office to get the mail for the client. So there were a number of hurdles that we had to clear in order to help the clients out.
Well, we helped a lot of clients out with virtual meetings this year, and it was the first time, as you said, for a lot of these clients going through the process. And on some of the calls that I had with clients, one of the main concerns was how the Inspector of Elections would work in the virtual-only format. So can you talk a little bit about the mechanisms and mechanics of how it works in the virtual format? I understand that you basically try to mirror as closely as possible to an in-person meeting.
Yes, you do, but there are some things that are different and made it more difficult. I mean, typically when you have an in-person meeting, the inspector's on site, usually an hour before, meets with the client, and there's a certain level of comfort that you get from meeting with the client in person. When you're on the virtual meeting, you don't have that ability to meet directly with the client, so they're kind of have to just accept the fact of the way it is, and that you're just going to be speaking at the meeting, that you're going to be able to process any votes that come in, and you're going to be able to certify the election after it's over. When you're there in person, it's a lot easier to walk through that process with them.
But I imagine it went pretty smoothly for you at these meetings, and it was relatively seamless. Is that correct?
Yeah, in most cases, there were some issues. There are some tabulators out there who are not able to produce a voting result directly after the meeting is over if a shareholder votes at the meeting.
Okay.
There are instances where the inspector is not able to certify the election after the virtual meeting is concluded. They'd have to wait to the following day. If we were there in person, we wouldn't have had that issue and would be able to certify right then and there.
Okay. And I know one of the major changes that we saw this year was, for the first time ever, we saw contested solicitations and contested meetings hold virtual meetings. It's always been done in an in-person meeting prior to 2020 and the pandemic. But due to the necessity for the public health and due to just the mechanics of actually having a meeting this year, it seemed like for the first time we saw some contested elections go virtual. Can you talk about what that was like? I understand you were involved in a few.
Yeah, we were. We actually probably did the first one this year. They definitely presented some unique challenges. first of all, you had to get a comfort level with two parties in the contest that the rules were going to be fair when it came to delivering votes to the inspector of election. So we had to arrange a process before the meeting to get the bulk of the votes from both sides. And then we had to arrange a process at the meeting itself so both sides had equal access to giving the inspectors their votes. So what we would typically do is set up direct emails for both sides to deliver their proxies to us. We'd back it up with fax numbers, of course, in case the internet went down or something like that. And we also had personnel available via cell phone in case someone had an issue submitting a vote, because we wanted to confirm the receipt of every vote that was received, so there would be no question that when someone sent in a vote, they would get it, that we would get it rather. In addition, it also caused an issue with those shareholders who wanted to vote at the meeting by ballot. So if a registered shareholder wanted to submit a ballot and vote at the meeting in a contest, we had to have that availability also. Since with the virtual meeting, you have to register X number of days before the meeting, you would know whether or not you were going to be at the meeting. You would be able to submit a ballot online and email it directly to the inspector. So again, we can confirm receipt. Some of the other issues that came up were what would happen if there were shareholders who were trying to get us their vote, but for one reason or another, they weren't able to. They had a problem with their machine, their email, or something like that. So we had to have a direct link to either the chairman or the general counsel of the company to get in touch with them and say, look, there's a shareholder trying to submit a vote, don't close the polls yet. So those are some of the issues that came up with regard to contestants.
And how were they ultimately resolved?
We really didn't have any problems. We had enough backup plans in place so that we didn't have any issues. I mean, we didn't have any issues from the email right on down, but we tried to set up a plan so that if something did occur, that there were remedies in place to satisfy both sides that their votes would be received in a timely fashion.
That's great. And as the pandemic continues into the fall, it seems like it might bleed over into next proxy season. Do you anticipate doing a large number of virtual meetings again next year? And if so, do you have any suggestions for companies who are going to go out and do it for another year?
Actually, yes, I think we are. I mean, we've already got quite a few clients on the books for 2021. And at this point, I think all of them so far are virtual or planning to do virtual meetings. So yeah, there are some things that we can change. Routine meetings, I think there are some ways to streamline the process a little bit, especially when it comes to the vote tabulation. Again, that's going to depend on who the tabulator is. If we're tabulating, it's kind of seamless because it's our site. We see the votes immediately in real time as they come in. If we're the inspector and there's another tabulator, then we do have some things we need to do to kind of streamline that service a little bit so that we can provide quality service to the client and get them certification immediately after the meeting's over.
Well, great. Thank you so much for your time today, Mike. And it's always great catching up with you. So I'm glad we had the opportunity to do this.
Thanks, Brian. I appreciate it.
All right. See you soon.
Right. Bye.